So decathlon is we compete to try and find the most all-round athlete. So we compete in 10 events across 2 days. Day one's 100 meters, long jump, shot put, high jump, 400 meters. And then day two is the hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and 1500. So it's fairly intense. And the fatigue you get after a decathlon is probably similar to what you would have when you run a marathon. Apart from we have it upper body as well as lower body. Is that kind of intensity of competition. And we all kind of get onto the start line of 1500 meters. We can barely stand up before we start running. So that's kind of what it's all about. But it's great fun because it's so difficult. It's technically difficult. Physically, it's really difficult. We're kind of all in it together, which is one of the really nice things about decathlon. The French team call it the spirit of decathlon. And it's whether you're first or last, you run round at the end with your flag for your country. We do that lap of honour. It's not just a medalist. Everybody does the lap of honour and takes a bow together. So that's really nice. That's why I love it, because it's very much a team event, even though we're competing against each other. And we'll even coach each other during the competition. So my best event was a high jump. I would come in the high jump at 195-ish. So while I'm waiting for the others to jump, because they're probably going to finish at 195, I'd be coaching them.
In this week's episode, Martin Brockman, a former decathlete and current coach, talks about the concept of purpose in sports, his journey to becoming a bronze medalist at the Commonwealth Games, and his transition into coaching. Martin shares insights on the mental and physical challenges athletes face, the importance of community in sports education, and the development of performance pathways for young athletes. This emphasizes the needs for sacrifices in the pursuit of athletic excellence and the value of education in coaching.
Hi Martin, welcome to Sporting Purpose, Dream, Believe, Achieve. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks Matt. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming on. My first question for you today is, what is purpose to you and how does it relate to sport?
I mean, it's quite a big question. It's kind of an existential question to start. Because purpose is really whatever we make from it, from whatever we're doing. So for me, my purpose is obviously around sport. Lots of the people I was involved with, their whole purpose was around sport. But I've met a lot of different athletes and everyone had a different purpose, even in the highest levels of sport. So some people's purpose was just to win medals. Some people's purpose was to try and make money. My purpose was about inspiring the next generation of athletes, using my journey to inspire others. So I really think it's whatever you make from it. And I think purpose, whilst you're going through it, is what you're trying to achieve. But I think the big learning really is on the reflection after that and using the learning for whatever your next journey is.
Brilliant, I love that. So for anyone who doesn't know you, your major claim to fame is the bronze medal at the Delhi Commonwealth Games in the decathlon, which often is, by purists of athletics, would describe as the most all-rounded athlete. Take us back to the beginning. How did you get there? How did you get involved in decathlon? And yeah, talk us through the start of the journey.
I mean, what people don't really understand is that I actually wasn't very good, which is why I did decathlon. I was the kid at school. At primary school, I was giant. I'm now 6'6". So at primary school, I was an absolute giant of a kid. I could do every sport, win every sport, fine. During secondary school, I was the fifth fastest runner in my class, not in the school, not in the year group, in my class. So I didn't actually get to run in the relay on sports day. But I was the kid who would be the 11th pick for the football team and the 5th pick for the basketball team. And I played in every team, but just about made it in. And what I struggled with was the subjective nature of those team sports. The kids and the teacher get to decide who's good and who's not good. And I really liked in athletics, we'll just have a race and we'll see who's the fastest. We'll do a long jump and we'll just measure it and we'll see who jumped the furthest. And I quite liked that. But I still, I was ranked maybe like 200th in the country in my late teens. But I love decathlon. I love the all-round sport because I get very bored doing one thing. My best event was a high jump, And by 18, I managed to qualify for English schools, the only English schools I ever went to in the high jump. But for me, there's only so many times you can jump over a stick before it gets quite boring. So I did decathlon for fun. And when we're talking about purpose, I never really enjoyed school. I think it's just my personality type that it's not my way of learning. So not that I struggled, I did fine, but I didn't enjoy it, and I wasn't ready to go to university straight out of school to continue that journey. So I decided to take a year or two out to train as an athlete, see how it went. Parents weren't that impressed with that idea, but they allowed me to do it. And after 2 years, I'd gone from around 200th in the country in decathlon to making my first international team. I competed for Great Britain under 23s in a little tiny little competition, and then 2 years after that, I got my first major competition, which was the Commonwealth Games, and I came away with a bronze medal. So I think people assume you must be super talented, but actually, I was a nobody. I just worked incredibly hard, and I went from zero to an international medalist within 4 years.
Do you think that helped, that it was such a quick transition from being a nobody, we'll say, to that high level bronze medalist? The fact that you didn't have time to plan and dwell on it for years, you just kind of did it, and it all evolved very quickly.
Yeah, there's definitely something to ignorance and things like events like the pole vault. I had a 15-foot pole that was 185 pounds, and I went to a 6. I thought, well, I need a bigger stick. I'll go from a 15 to a 16, not realizing that there's a 15 and a quarter, 15 and a half, 15 and 3/4, and then a 16. So I jumped up 4 poles, and I basically went, how much do I weigh? 200 pounds. I'll go from 185 to 200, not really realizing there's a 190, 195, and then a 200. So I went up about 12 poles in one go because I just didn't know. And the same thing when it came to the competition, I just turned up and thought, maybe I'll win a medal. And I just told people I'm gonna try. No idea that I'm not supposed to. And there's something in that ignorance, because then later on, when other people start to realise that you're doing quite well, we obviously had the London Olympics coming up, and the media starts coming to film training, and they want you to be in radio interviews. You've got all your friends and family thought, well, you won a medal at the Commonwealth Games, maybe you're going to win a medal at the Olympics, which is just a totally different level altogether. And that pressure then starts to build. So I think it was good for me personally to stay under the radar for as long as possible. I didn't particularly like being in the limelight, or I didn't enjoy the pressure that some people enjoy that. But then I'd also not really been taught or trained how to handle that pressure, which I think would have been really useful. And I think that athletes that are talented growing up maybe get that support that I didn't have.
And nowadays, obviously, people are more media trained, and like you mentioned, they're already ready to deal with it. But subsequently to that competition, then you had, I believe you failed to make the Olympics team, and then you returned to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, but you didn't medal. How did you handle, I guess, for most people that wouldn't be a failure, but given that you medaled in the previous one, how did you view that Commonwealth Games?
So that Commonwealth Games was different because I went into it knowing that I wasn't going to medal, partly because I was actually when I went into the first Commonwealth Games, I was the third of the 3 English people. I just finished on top of that competition. This one, I went in with the 2 other English people. I knew that one of them was going to win a medal, but also I got quite ill leading into the competition. So I always had in the back of my mind this quiet confidence. You never know. I might have this magic competition again. I might be able to do something. Once I got ill about 6 weeks out from the competition, I kind of knew that wasn't going to happen. But what I did is I just enjoyed the competition much more. When I was in Delhi, because I was fighting for a medal the whole way through, you get so absorbed. People talk about flow state. You get so absorbed into it that I really can't remember that much of what happened. And I know lots of people who competed at London 2012, and they're the same. They can't really remember it because they were so absorbed in what was going on. And having missed London Olympics, to have then essentially another home games, I used it as an opportunity to soak up the atmosphere of what that feels like. Knowing that I didn't do that in Delhi, I didn't get the opportunity to do it in London, and I wasn't going to win anyway. So I actually spent a lot of time with the crowd, signing autographs, talking with people, and just looking around and enjoying what you think being an athlete is, and actually trying to be in that moment a little bit.
So based on that, which would you say was a more successful games when you take all those factors into consideration?
I mean, Delhi is obviously the more successful. Performance was better. I won a medal, which is what we go there to do. But I feel very lucky that actually, as a even though I said I wasn't very talented, as a 9-10-year-old kid, I wanted to be an athlete. That's what I wanted to do, and I feel lucky that actually I got to be an athlete full time for 10 years. I travelled around the world to do competitions, or did the European circuit for a very long time. I lived the lifestyle. I got to compete at major games, be on TV. I got to win a medal. I did everything except for go to the Olympics. So I don't know. Even though in my head I failed to make the Olympics, because that's the only thing I actually cared about. When I reflect on it now, I did everything that I wanted to do as a kid, which is why I think I'm very content with it now. But the short answer is, if you go to a major games, your only aim is to win a medal. It's your only job, or to make a final. So obviously Delhi was the big success, but I enjoyed Glasgow just as much.
Would you have traded your bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games to be selected for the Olympics?
It's a tough question. It's a tough question because at the time, yes, and I think the athletes who get the tattoo on their chest, the Olympic rings. You can have that tattoo when you're 100 years old, and it will still be amazing. To get the opportunity to compete in London would have been amazing, but I also would have been there as a guy who would have finished 25th in the decathlon or 20th in the decathlon. Is at that level. And I would have got to say I was an Olympian, and I went to London 2012, but no one would know that. No one would remember that. Whereas long term, being an international medalist, even though it's actually a lower standard, it for my career, it's been much, much better. So as an athlete, I would take it. As an adult and trying to build a career, I'm quite happy with what I've got, because I can use it as a kind of like a marketing tool. I see my medal as an extra qualification that nobody else has.
You're right. There's not too many people with decathlon medals flying around the place. For anyone who's not into athletics, or maybe is into another sport but is listening into this, could you tell us a bit about what a decathlon actually is and how you would train for it?
So decathlon is, we compete to try and find the most all-round athlete. So we compete in 10 events across 2 days. Day one's 100 meters, long jump, shot put, high jump, 400 meters. And then day two is the hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and 1500. So it's fairly intense. And the fatigue you get after a decathlon is probably similar to what you would have when you run a marathon. Apart from we have it upper body as well as lower body. Is that kind of intensity of competition. And we all kind of get onto the start line with 1500 meters. We can barely stand up before we start running. So that's kind of what it's all about. But it's great fun because it's so difficult. It's technically difficult. Physically, it's really difficult. We're kind of all in it together, which is one of the really nice things about decathlon. The French team call it the spirit of decathlon. And it's whether you're first or last, you run round at the end with your flag for your country. We do that lap of honour. It's not just a medalist. Everybody does the lap of honour and takes a bow together. So that's really nice. That's why I love it, because it's very much a team event, even though we're competing against each other. And we'll even coach each other during the competition. So my best event was a high jump. I would come in the high jump at 195-ish. So while I'm waiting for the others to jump, because they're probably going to finish at 195, I'd be coaching them whilst I'm waiting to start the competition. But then when it comes to the javelin or discus, which is one of my worst events, they would then be coaching me. So that's kind of a bit of a feel for what the decathlon is. In terms of training for it, it's pretty intense, because obviously we've got to cover 10 events plus all the physical training that goes with that. So a typical day would be 2 to 3 events. practicing for maybe an hour each, something like that. Plus, then we do our physical running or strength training afterwards. So I would train typically 5 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. That would be a fairly normal schedule. But then we probably don't want to go into too much of the nuances of it here, but you have ways to, you put the similar sort of events on the same day. So your speed power events will go on one day, and then the next day you'll do some of your strength events, and then you'll have a lighter technical day with some endurance running. So you can kind of load the fatigue through the week. But that's how we structure it: 2 to 3 events practicing. If we were doing speed and power, we'd then do our gym training. If we were doing something a bit more rhythm, then we do our running on those kind of days.
Easy schedule then.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, I mean, it's a full-time job. You can't do, when you're doing that kind of intensity, you have to do the training for 5 or 6 hours, and you have to just take a sleep in the afternoon and rest in the evening. That's it.
And it's hard to put your body under that much stress for such a long period of time while you're competing. Was that one of the factors when you eventually decided to call it a day, or how did you make that decision to transition to, the next chapter for you?
For a lot of people, it is. A lot of people get injured out of it, and that's part of being a high-level decathlete, is actually just being able to survive the training. Most people that would come and try and train with me just couldn't keep up with the volume and the intensity of it for that long. They might survive 6 months, whereas I did it for almost 10 years. But I actually stopped for a couple of reasons. One was I realized that I wasn't going to get better anymore. I'd reached my peak, and I was starting to get slower. And once you start to get slower, it's game over. Or I realized I wasn't going to get faster, at least. But I also didn't want to be that person who was kept going and trudging on and then ends up getting the injuries. Because once you've got those bad injuries, you have your elbow and operation on your elbow, or you get your tendons problems, they're going to stay with you for life. So I remained fairly injury free. So I wanted to stay that way. But I was also coaching. So I started coaching when I was 16. I coached the whole way through my career. So when I was thinking about retiring, my athletes were getting better and better. And a couple of them got to the point where they kind of had one eye on the next Commonwealth Games as potentially could make it into the team. And I decided I can't aim for that myself and also coach other people who are aiming for that, because at some point we're going to have to get on the start line together. I'm going to have to beat you. And if you've just, I've been working with you for the last 2 years and you've been paying me to get you there, and then I beat you out the team, it's not really the right thing to do.
And from there, post athlete days, we've gone to Aspire Academy in Doha. How did you find that transition? You mentioned doing the badges from a young age. Did you felt like it was quite a natural progression?
Yeah, and I mean, by the time I'd retired, I'd already been coaching for 10 years. So it was an obvious route for me to go into coaching. In the last couple of years of my career, I was also coaching for Brunel University in London and coaching some of their more senior athletes. I was traveling with the European juniors team. So I was going down that career path. But actually, what I enjoyed most was youth coaching. I dabbled in a little bit more high performance, but having been through that myself, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go through that again. Whereas I really got a lot out of coaching youth for the last 10 years. So the opportunity at Aspire Academy came up. They reached out to me about going over to work in their development program, which was that 12 to 15, 16 years old, which is the bit that I really enjoy. And, I'm someone, I've traveled all over the world, so moving abroad didn't really feel like a big deal to me. So I kind of jumped on the opportunity.
And how long did you spend there before you created Brockman Athletics?
So I was in Qatar for 6 years, and had various roles. So I went in there as the development coach, moved to senior jumps coach, coaching the high jumpers, long jumpers, triple jumpers. Went back to become head of athlete development, which kind of did the whole pathway. But the Brockman Athletics stuff is in working with teachers, is something I've done since 2014, running workshops with schools, but kind of on the side. It's something I put on the on the back a little bit when I was in Aspire, because you couldn't really do both. I couldn't advertise both. But having built this curriculum out for the academy, I then had lots of teachers coming to me and asking me where they could find resources, where they could find videos for teaching. And there wasn't really anything around. So I adapted what I was doing there to make it school friendly. And I basically, when I decided to leave last year and to create this whole curriculum for schools and to head off and film everything and get it all there, so at least there's a good resource out there for my sport.
So we were talking about performance pathways now, not Brockman Athletics. So two separate entities, or are they kind of merged, blended together?
Well, one has come out of the other. So Brockman Athletics was me trying to fill that gap of teachers reaching out to me, where can I find athletics resources? And there aren't any. So I then built the complete athletics curriculum for schools. That saw me going all around the world last year, visiting schools, delivering workshops, giving the curriculum out to those schools, visiting. I went to lots of conferences off the back of that. And at the same time, I then spoke to other coaches who were doing the same kind of traveling roadshow. And they were saying how great my curriculum was, because they didn't have anything like that. But also they didn't really have the skills to make that kind of thing. So I've got a very good friend, my family friend, who's a graphic designer, and he helped me put all of the resources together at a much higher level than they could do on their own. But realizing that there wasn't one for gymnastics, there wasn't one for basketball, there wasn't one for dance, I then reached out to some of those coaches that I've met that were obviously great coaches, delivering great workshops, and said, well, let's build those resources together. And that's where Performance Pathway came from.
Kind of like the Avengers, and you're maybe
Avengers assemble a website at far too much money, far too much time. Yeah,
you're Captain America, something like that.
Yeah.
All right, and so we've got all these. So you mentioned some of the sports there, and all of these curriculums and videos and resources are all under the one platform, which is Performance Pathways. And also behind you, we've got Pathways podcast. So how does that tie into everything?
Well, I mean, part of what I've tried to create is the curricula, the lesson plans for teachers to use, but a big part of that is also having education and trying to become a bit of a hub and a community around it. So there's one thing handing out lesson plans and saying, deliver this lesson. It's come from England basketball coaches created these basketball lessons, but unless you understand how to deliver them, they're not really that useful. They're just there's one thing copying the drill, but do you know why you're copying it? Therefore, can teach it. So, alongside all of the lesson plans and the videos of the lesson plans, there's also educational content and an educational course, and we've linked the pieces from the course that you need to deliver each lesson individually. So there's the resources, and then another big part of that is the education to go alongside that to actually be able to deliver those lessons effectively.
So if I was a PE teacher listening to this, or maybe a head of department, I'm probably thinking, and rightly so, sounds like, phenomenal product. You've put together the expertise of people in a variety of different sports. But if I take this to my headmaster to get approval for, the cost of whatever it is, they're going to tell me, why do we need this? Because, this is your job to write curriculums and plan. What could that person say to their head to convince them that your product is the right one?
Yeah, I mean, we've had this with quite a few schools, that the teachers want the resources, especially because they're so busy with all of their lessons, after school clubs, working with teams, to sit down and actually write lesson plans for every sport. And we've also purposely picked the sports that they have to deliver that they might not be that comfortable with, things like athletics, gymnastics, dance. So, but that's one part of it. But the other part, of course, is the education. This is for what you would pay. The price of the platform is the same as what you'd pay for me to come in to deliver a 2-day workshop. And we've got online courses for 6 different sports on there. And we've matched it up with your lesson plan. So in terms of, that's essentially you could use your CPD budget for the year, and the resources are for free. You could view it that way. We've got education for 6 times, but there's also a whole section on there about personal development through sport. So it's not just the technical skills. We've also got a personal development section, which has basically 5-minute starter activities that you can do with your students, which introduce them to concepts around Sporting values is one of our frameworks. We've got the performance mindset, and we've got sports psychology that match up with the age and stage of the students and the same age and stage that we're using for the lesson plan. So it's not just the lessons; it's the education and it's the personal development through sport, all in one place and all matched up. So it ticks a lot of boxes, and I think it depends who the ethos of your school and the ethos of the person who's signing the check. Depends which of those you might want to push. Whether you want to go the high performance, we've got these high performance programs from these Great Britain international coaches, or whether you go look at this personal development concept that we can use to deliver through sport. Really depends on the school and their ethos.
You've described a lot of components. How would you describe performance pathways in one sentence?
It's a structured pathway, a structured curriculum, and a holistic curriculum for supporting students to achieve their potential.
What age range do you predominantly focus everything towards?
Well, it starts at what in the UK would be Key Stage 2, so upper primary school, and then it goes all the way through to the end of secondary school. So if you were to be able to achieve all of the skills that are in the top level, what we call sporting excellence level, those are the skills you should need to achieve top grades at GCSE, essentially. But then it comes, and then we work backwards from there to how do we introduce those skills, and then back from there, how do we use those skills or use the sport to teach fundamental movement skills that underpin the skills we're going to want later in the program.
And is there any plans in the future to progress from the foundations from a younger age, from below upper primary?
So at the moment, no. But what we've done is we've partnered with Beyond the Physical to make sure that our curricula align with each other. So it's not really my expertise, and we're performance pathways. We're trying to do the more, I know it's more traditional sports model, but we have these other elements underpinning that. But we also have kind of learning objectives. We have the physical literacy, think, move, feel, connect, which run through all of our curricula. And then Beyond the Physical for primary, they have think, move, connect, I think. So the three of those. So we've had these themes that run all the way from their early years program. And then as they get to the end of their curricula, and it starts to introduce sport-specific lessons, that's when our curricula then take over. And what does that look like at upper primary?
Was that planned, that crossover in theme?
Initially, no, but they're some of the people that I met on my traveling roadshow. I saw the work they're doing is great. That they don't really have, I sat and asked them how they've done it, because the program they've put together, their platform is really great from what teachers are telling me as well, not just them themselves. And they're not really interested in the secondary school stuff, in the sport specific stuff. And I'm just not an early years and a primary school PE teacher. It's not my bag. I come from a high performance background, and I'm trying to teach how you use that journey to teach all these other skills. How can you actually support people along that journey and get the benefits out of having pursued it as well? So it wasn't necessarily planned, but once we realized that we were kind of aligned in our thinking, we were then quite proactive in making sure that it does connect together. And we're still working on it now and what that's going to look.
Brilliant. It sounds very promising, and it's great, you found that early partnership. My next question would be around, you've got a lot of your knowledge and other people's knowledge all on one online platform. For anyone who is thinking of creating content or starting their own platform, how would you do that on a technical level, or who would you hire on a technical level? And how do you protect the copyright to what you own?
So it's the short answer is you can't really stop people from sharing it, but then there are ways of locking it down. But I want it needs to be practical. People need to be able to print it off and take it onto the field with them. So I don't worry about it. My thoughts are, if you decide to download it stop using it, which people who are on a free trial, they can download whatever they want, but we're going to continue to add great content. And if you don't use the platform anymore, you also lose access to all the educational content, anything new that we're adding, the podcast, the blogs. There's so much value that we can add. If you want to take it and steal what we've got now, sure. There's a lot more coming all the time. We're adding new content, so that doesn't bother me. But in terms of copyright, it's original content, so it's copyrighted anyway just by UK law, which is where we're registered. There's also the terms and conditions on the website that kind of protect you. I don't think there's nothing to stop someone copying. We can't copyright long-term athlete development. Who owns it? But what you can do is become the place to go for that kind of stuff. And that's really the aim. And part of our education is we run free workshops. We're giving away as much as we can. And then if you want the high quality content that goes with it, that's what's on the platform.
Fountain of knowledge, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, everybody on their journey is like, where did you get most of your knowledge from? Some from university, mainly from having conversations with people day in, day out, working with great people. And if as a PE teacher, you can share knowledge around teaching practices, but where do you get knowledge around sports from? Finding access to those coaches is really difficult. So that's what we've tried to be, just a centre. We've got a workshop coming up, well, next few weeks around basketball and gymnastics with our coaches, and they're going to be there for an hour giving away that information for free. But then the application of that is through the lesson plans that we have on the platform. So I think education should be free. It's something I'm really passionate about.
And for anyone who's listening who's not sure, who's never seen you deliver a session or not seen when you're about, I can personally vouch, having been at the Phobesia conference, and I really enjoyed the athletic session. It's not one of my strongest areas, throwing, and I love how you adapted it. We were indoors in the sports hall, just to simple exercises with a basketball that we could all take away and apply those fundamental movement skills, within our own environments, wherever that is. So yeah, if anyone's listening and they're not sure, I would highly recommend Brockman Athletics / the Performance Pathways. I think it's a really excellent resource. I'm going to jump to some quick fire questions, Martin. Well, I'm going to start with two actually that I haven't written down that I read about earlier. The first one is, do you know about the origins of decathlon, where it actually came from and what it means?
Well, yes, because actually my my wife happens to be Greek, and I can speak a little bit Greek. So obviously deca is the Greek word for 10, and athlos is the Greek word for athlete or competition. So it comes from decathlon, which is 10 competition from ancient Greek.
But it originated also from the pentathlon, which was around 780 BC. And interestingly, I was reading it was like sprints, throws, but also a wrestling match. So my next question is, how do you think you would have fared in the olden age pentathlon wrestling?
I mean, I'm not that sure about rolling around naked with sweaty wrestlers. I'm not sure it's my scene. I think if I was the size I am in that era, if I'm still 2 meters tall and 90 odd kilos, I think it would have done quite well. And also growing up, I did a little bit of judo. But I think I'm not sure within the pentathlon that would have been my specialist event necessarily.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said you were in nearly every school team, so I suppose judo as well is another one to put on the list.
Why not roll around in your pajamas?
Yeah, that's it. Better than the sweaty men naked, as you described, I think. But when you were training for the Commonwealth Games, did you find the mental or physical aspect of preparation more challenging?
The mental side of it then was fine for me. I struggled a little bit because I got injured right at the start of the season, which meant that I was fighting for my place right up to last moment. So I actually qualified for the games the day before it closed, like literally right at the last moment. But I had no real expectations. I think actually in long run, if I'd missed the Commonwealth Games, I would have probably had a better chance of qualifying for the Olympics. Interestingly, because I wouldn't have had pressure and the expectation. But physically, it was very hard. The training was tough through the winter, but then it gets easier and easier and easier into the competition. So I don't know if you can pick one above the other. I think that they kind of come hand in hand. When training's physically hard, mentally it becomes harder. And then as training gets better and gets lighter, you start to feel great. So they kind of come hand in hand.
Out of the 10 events in the decathlon, apart from the high jump, which event did you consider your strongest and which was your weakest?
So javelin hurdles were my weakest. There are two events which will probably surprise you, but they're two events that have very similar rhythms. So lots of people who are good at hurdles are also good at the javelin. I never really got that rhythm, was never really taught it well in the first place. But events like high jump, shot put go together. So that they were my stronger events. High jump, shot put was good. Discus became good at the end, but was probably my weakest one when I started.
That shows you can adapt to your training very well. Winning a bronze medal is a huge achievement. Did you feel more pride in your personal accomplishment or representing your country?
I think probably in the personal achievement, partly because it's an individual event anyway. I was always very proud of representing my country and being a Great Britain athlete and competing for England. But it is an individual sport, and also when you're in those environments, it's difficult for people to understand that everyone there is competing for their country. So that's nothing. How many Olympic athletes I knew and Olympic medalists I knew. So that just becomes normal. It's everybody's competing for their country. It's the medal that makes you stand out within that environment.
Looking back, was there a particular moment during your career when you faced a setback that defined how you moved forward?
Almost every day. Normally it's an injury because that happens to everyone. I think my two major ones were the year of Delhi, the Commonwealth Games, where I tore my hamstring in the winter or coming out of the winter, which meant when I went to my qualifying competition, I was nowhere near qualifying. Had to go away, replan, train, and with every competition that I tried, not ready yet, go back into training. Each time you do that, you feel further and further away from qualifying. And it becomes harder and harder to go back and replan. We don't have time for this anymore. It's kind of the feeling you get. So that happens a lot, and it also happens through your career. As you to begin with, you're a kid. Every competition you do, you're breaking personal bests. It's easy. As you get older and your personal bests are actually quite good now, it becomes harder and harder and harder, and you don't get personal best at every competition, and you have to learn to. It's part of the journey is learning to overcome that. This one's not gone well, but that's okay because now we know what to do to reset for the next competition. So that's kind of part of maturity as an athlete.
Being a victim of your own success, setting the bar too high, literally.
Yeah. Sometimes. I mean, I jumped 2.14 meters in the high jump, and that becomes your benchmark. But then since then, that's one of the best high jumps in the world. I added a few kilos in body mass in order to get my throws up, but that meant that I then became a consistent 207, 208 high jumper, which is still one of the best in the world. But it kind of feels like a failure because my personal best is higher than that. But actually, that's really good jumping for the athlete that I am now because I'm not skinny anymore. I'm now actually 5 kilos, 3 kilos heavier. So, of course, you can't jump as high.
In terms of recovery after tough events, did you prefer to focus on rest or use active recovery techniques like massage and ice baths?
So, I mean, I like to just take some time off, really. I would... I'd ice bath during the competition after the first day only, really. I wouldn't ice bath afterwards because I wanted the body to heal itself. So I would just leave it as it is, and I would get extra sleep, extra food. After a decathlon, I'd basically take a week off, and I'd try and move and be active because your legs are stiff. I'd walk quite a lot, And then when you feel ready after 5-6 days, you start jogging. And I would be training again the next week. So I think for me, complete rest was the best thing to do. But then whilst you're training, you have to do active recovery because you have to train the next day or the next after the weekend or whatever it is. So, but after a decathlon, you go and have a big party, and then you just take a few days off.
It seems pretty fair for the level of intensity. Competing at such a high level requires a lot of sacrifice, as I'm sure you well know. What was the biggest sacrifice that you had to make in pursuit of your career within athletics?
Probably friendships, if I'm honest. So I've got lots of people now that I respect, and they respect me. And if I see them, we'll have a really good time, a really good catch up. But the really good ones, often we're not friends as you would typically see friends. We're people that have been through a journey together, and we understand each other, but we're also competitors. So you have friendships, but they're not really friendships. So now when I look back at my time, you have friends from other events, fine. But in terms of actually decathletes, if you're mates with the people around you, you can't beat them on the day. So it's a strange one. It's a strange one to try and explain, because in all intents and purposes, if you see us together, we look like friends. But it's a different relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very... it must be a difficult truth to accept to yourself, that the people who you're closest people are not your friends. But I think it's a very honest reflection with, your experiences competing at the highest level, because not many people can relate to what you're talking about, not having had that experience. Right, my last question, Martin, is if you could give advice to young athletes who aspire to compete at the highest level, what would you say to them and why?
I would say that probably what we've just said. If you really want to make it at the highest level, you're going to have to make those kind of sacrifices. There's a point in your career where you move from I'm doing this because it's fun to this is my job now. And at that point, the fun, it's not that the fun doesn't go away because you've got the best job in the world, but the idea of my friends would say, let's go out to the pub, and I can't come. I've got to sleep. Or they go out and do fun things. Or they eat what they want. I can't do that. And you're going to have to make a decision of, do you want to be an athlete, or do you want to be popular and hang out with your mates and do this fun stuff? And it's going to happen during your 20s. So you kind of have to make a decision of, in my 20s, am I going to have a great time while I'm young and I still can and I have no responsibilities, or am I going to drop all of that stuff and I'm going to be the outcast who's going to do this weird stuff? My friends couldn't understand why we're going out to have fun. You're going to go and run around the track until you're sick. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that's part of it. Like you cannot get drunk and turn up to training tomorrow hungover because somebody else is training and they're not hungover. That's it. It's just you have to take it off the table. And so a big part of that for me was changing the language I used. Like I just used the language of you can't do that anymore. And when I was struggling with that, everyone was having a good time, and I say, I can't have a beer, I can't eat this, and it was difficult. When I then changed my language to, actually, I just choose not to. I choose not to do that because I'm an athlete. I didn't bother me at all anymore because it was a decision rather than a hindrance of being in the job and the role. But that's something you need to know is going to happen when you make that shift over from I really enjoy this, I want to do it as a career. Once it becomes a career, it's not fun anymore. So you're probably going to need to have another hobby.
Brilliant advice, and thanks for everything today, Martin, sharing all your knowledge and experience. For anyone who's interested in performance pathways, what can they do to find out more?
Yeah, they can just go to performancepathways.co.uk. We've got the whole website set up there. You can take a look around, and if you want to try it out, you drop me an email at info@performancepathways.co.uk. Mention that you want to have a free trial, and we'll get you set up. You can go and test out all the resources and all the videos.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time today, Martin. Take care and have a great evening.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on. We really appreciate the work you're doing.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please make sure to hit the subscribe button, like, and make sure you're following the Sporting Purpose Instagram page to keep up to date with all the latest episodes and lots more sporting content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.